Hi, I am Levent. I'm an incoming computer science PhD student at the Penn State University. Today, I'm here to talk about LinnOS Paper's publicly executable sample workflow on Chameleon testbed. Let's start with the Chameleon homepage. On this page, you can click on the Experiment tab and select Trophy to access all the shared experiments. From the list, we select the experiment called LinnOS artifact. Now we can see the LinnOS artifacts interface where you can see some information about what this artifact is and what it does. On this page, you can launch the artifact by pressing Launch on Chameleon icon. This launches Chameleon testbed where we can run the sample LinnOS experiment. Before we delve into details of this package, I briefly want to talk about the LinnOS paper. Here you can see the link that I'm using to access to the paper. The full title of the paper is LinnOS Predictability on Unpredictable Flash Storage with a Light Neural Network. Here you can see the name of the authors. LinnOS is one of the first operating systems that utilize lightweight machine learning architecture to infer SSD performance at per IO level in real time. The real production traces and black box SSD devices are supported by LinnOS. Overall, compared to the hedging and heuristic-based methods, LinnOS achieves better average IO latencies by around 9.6 to 79.6%, with inference accuracy around 87 to 97% and per IO overhead of 4 to 6 microseconds. Going back to the LinnOS artifact, it only contains two end-to-end workflows, which are baseline and LinnOS. The other approaches mentioned in the paper, like hedging, heuristic-based approaches, are not included in this artifact, and this artifact does not reproduce any of the figures shown in the paper. Nevertheless, it still provides a variety of interactions ranging from application-level software to operating system and hardware with the Chameleon testbed. We thought that this could be a useful demonstration of Chameleon's capabilities for experiments that cover entire stack from application to hardware. It also allowed us to provide publicly executable LinnOS workflow to demonstrate the key components of the LinnOS. The artifact contains 5 files and a folder. Here you see more than 5 files. That's because I already ran the experiment, since it takes a significant amount of time to run it from scratch. But the main script is the LinnOS Jupyter notebook file. After you run the main script, you can also run the LinnOS result Jupyter notebook file to plot the results. Here you can see what other files do as well. The main script is divided into 4 steps, but before we talk about these steps, first we need to create a list and a storage hierarchy instance. To do that, we first set our Chameleon parameters here. For example, your project name will be probably different than what I have here. After that, we can run the cell that contains reservation.sh to create our list. The next cell, the one that starts with the key pair upload, creates the storage hierarchy instance and configures SSH settings. This process might take a while. Then we can run the await SSH to make sure that connection is up and running. Here we set few more parameters and we are ready to proceed with the experiment. We will start with the step 1. Here our aim in this step is to generate baseline results. Here we send the LinnOS writer replayer to the instance and unzip it. Then we use writer script inside the LinnOS writer replayer to populate 3 SSD devices with IO traces. Here we are using replayer fail script to demonstrate the failover behavior and obtain the results of the baseline model. The rest of the cells in step 1 converts the results in a more presentable form. Moving on to step 2. Step 2 is all about training the LinnOS machine learning model and implementing those learned weights into LinnOS kernel. First, we prepare our training traces for LinnOS machine learning architecture. And we use replayer fail script to do that. Then we install some Python libraries. Next, we do further modifications on this dataset to make it easier to train on our model. Then we run our prediction script called located inside the LinnOS writer replayer. To train our model. Rest of the cells in step 2 is about implementing learned weights into LinnOS kernel with the LinnOS supported format. You can just follow the step 3 to install the LinnOS kernel. Now we have LinnOS kernel up and running. In step 4, we just run our replay failover script to demonstrate the failover behavior on LinnOS kernel. After we are done with the experiment, we can use the cells in the cleanup section to release our lease and instance. You can run the LinnOS results plot script to display the results. Finally, I would like to mention that there is a significant performance randomness caused by the instances, and I recommend you take a look at the README file to learn how this randomness affects the results. You can also access our sample result using the reference folder. Thank you for listening.